r/confession my BIL cut my son's pay in half so I destroyed his barbecue business. r/confession my BIL cut my son's pay in half so I destroyed his barbecue business. The moment I saw my 17-year-old son counting crumpled bills at our kitchen table for the third time, I knew something was wrong. Mom, I think Mr. Peterson made a mistake with my paycheck again, Jake said, his voice small and confused. It's only $120 for the whole week, but I worked 32 hours. My blood went cold. That math didn't add up to the $15 an hour my brother-in-law Rick had promised when Jake started working at Smoky Rick's barbecue 3 months ago. I watched my kid's shoulders slump as he carefully smoothed out each wrinkled bill, and something fierce ignited in my chest. What did Uncle Rick say when you asked him about it? I kept my voice level, but my hands were already clenching into fists. Jake's face flushed red. He said it's still the temporary adjustment from when I accidentally dropped that tray of brisket. Remember? He said my pay would go back to normal once I proved I could be more careful. Jake looked up at me with those trusting brown eyes. It's been 3 months, Mom. I've been super careful. I haven't messed up once since then. My heart shattered. My baby was blaming himself, working twice as hard for half the money, all while my brother-in-law, who drove a brand new F-150 and just got back from his second vacation this year, was stealing from a teenager trying to save for college. Rick had always been a pompous ass. Ever since he married my husband's sister 15 years ago, he talked down to our family like we were his personal charity case. When Jake needed a summer job, Rick had made this big show of helping out family, acting like he was doing us some enormous favor by hiring my son at his precious restaurant. Jake, honey, can you go get Uncle Rick's business card from the fridge? I want to call him right now and clear this up. As Jake left the room, I pulled out my phone and did the math. $15 an hour down to $7.50. For 3 months. For a kid who was busting his ass, coming home exhausted and smelling like smoke, proudly telling me about the compliments he'd gotten from customers. Rick had stolen over $700 from my son. $700 that Jake needed for his college fund, money he'd earned with honest work and teenage determination. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about Rick taking advantage of Jake's inexperience, his trust, his desperate need to prove himself worthy. My son had been walking around for months thinking he wasn't good enough, that he had to work twice as hard to earn back his full wage, never knowing he was being played by a middle-aged man who should have been protecting him. When Jake came back with the card, I was already scrolling through my contacts, my mind racing with possibilities. You know what, baby? Don't worry about calling Uncle Rick tonight. It's getting late. I stood up and kissed the top of his head. Why don't you get some rest? I'll handle this. Jake's face brightened with relief. Thanks, Mom. I was worried I'd have to quit and find something else. I really like working there when Uncle Rick isn't being weird about stuff. After Jake went upstairs, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at that pathetic stack of bills. Rick thought he was so smart, so untouchable. He thought he could take advantage of my kid and get away with it because we needed the job. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jake's confused face as he counted those crumpled bills, heard the defeat in his voice when he blamed himself for Rick's temporary adjustment. By 3 a.m., I was wide awake, pacing our bedroom while my husband Tom snored peacefully beside me. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I needed time to think, to plan. Tom had already left for his construction job, and Jake was getting ready for school, moving slower than usual. I could tell the paycheck thing was weighing on him. Hey, before you go, I said, catching him at the door. Has Uncle Rick done anything else weird lately? Besides the pay thing? Jake shifted his backpack, looking uncomfortable. I mean, he's always been kind of intense. But lately he's been making comments about our family to the other employees. My stomach dropped. What kind of comments? Just stupid stuff. Like how we should be grateful for the opportunity, or how some people don't understand the value of hard work. Jake's cheeks burned red. Last week he told this story about how you and Dad needed him to throw us a lifeline with this job. Everyone was laughing. The rage that swept through me was so intense I had to grip the doorframe. Rick wasn't just stealing from Jake, he was humiliating our entire family, using my son as a punchline while paying him poverty wages. Mom? Are you okay? You look really pale. I forced a smile. I'm fine, honey. Have a good day at school. After Jake left, I sat down with my laptop and started researching. First stop, labor laws in our state. What I found made my blood boil even hotter. Minimum wage was $12 an hour. Even if Rick wanted to discipline Jake for the dropped tray, he couldn't legally pay him less than that. My brother-in-law wasn't just being an ass, he was breaking the law. But as I dug deeper, I realized filing a complaint with the Department of Labor would take months to resolve, and Jake needed this job for his college fund. Plus, Rick would know exactly who reported him. He'd probably fire Jake out of spite and make our family gatherings even more unbearable than they already were. No, I needed something more immediate. More personal. I opened a new browser tab and pulled up Smoky Rick's Barbecue on Google. 4.5 stars with over 300 reviews. The place was genuinely popular, Rick's food was decent, and he'd built up a solid reputation over the past 5 years. People loved the family atmosphere and Rick's down-home charm. If only they knew what kind of man he really was. I clicked through the photos customers had posted. Rick grinning behind the counter, shaking hands with the mayor, posing with his employee of the month, some college girl who probably had no idea she was working for a wage thief. Then I saw it. A photo from last month showing the kitchen through the serving window. My heart started racing as I zoomed in. There, clear as day, was an employee handling raw meat without gloves, right next to prepared food. The cutting boards looked like they hadn't been properly sanitized. And was that condensation dripping from an unclean vent directly onto the prep area? I screenshot everything, my hands trembling with excitement. Rick was so proud of his precious restaurant, so protective of his reputation in this small town. He had no idea he just handed me the ammunition I needed. But this was just the beginning. If Rick wanted to play games with my family, I was about to show him what a real game looked like. I spent the rest of that morning creating fake social media accounts. Sarah_Foodie 2024. Localeats_Mike. barbecue_lover_Jenny. Each one with a generic profile picture and a few scattered posts to look legitimate. I'd worked in digital marketing for 8 years before switching to my current office job. I knew exactly how to make these accounts look real. But as I sat there, cursor hovering over the keyboard, ready to leave my first scathing review, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister-in-law Diana. *K. Rick mentioned Jake's doing great at the restaurant. So proud of that kid. We should all get together this weekend to celebrate. Maybe dinner at Smoky Rick's? Rick says he'll comp the meal smiling face *. The audacity made me dizzy. Rick was literally inviting us to his restaurant to celebrate how well he was exploiting my son. I could picture him now, playing the generous uncle while secretly laughing about the money he was pocketing from Jake's labor. I was typing a polite decline when another text came through, this one from my husband Tom. Rick called me at work. Says he wants to offer Jake more hours this summer, maybe train him as assistant manager. Thinks the kid has real potential. I told him we'd talk about it tonight. My hand started shaking. Rick was doubling down, probably figuring he could lock Jake into this arrangement long term. Turn my bright, hardworking son into his personal discount employee while making Tom think he was doing us a favor. The worst part? Tom sounded excited. He'd been worried about Jake's college expenses, and here was his brother-in-law offering what looked like a real opportunity. Tom had no idea Rick was already stealing from Jake, and if I told him now, he'd want to confront Rick directly. My husband was a good man, but subtle he was not. He'd march over there and demand answers, and Rick would just lie, make Jake look bad, maybe fire him entirely. I needed proof. Real, undeniable evidence of what Rick was doing. I grabbed my keys and drove to the restaurant. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, the dead zone between lunch and dinner. Perfect timing. The parking lot was nearly empty except for Rick's shiny F-150 and a beat-up Honda that probably belonged to whoever was working the afternoon shift. I sat in my car for a few minutes, gathering my courage, then walked inside. Well. Look who's here. Rick's booming voice filled the empty dining room. He emerged from behind the counter, all fake smiles and arms spread wide like we were long-lost friends. Come to check up on your boy? He's not working today, but I gotta say, that kid's really turned himself around after that little incident. Little incident? I kept my voice sweet, interested. The dropped tray thing. Cost me about $40 in wasted food, plus the time to remake everything. Rick shook his head like he was discussing a tragic accident. But I believe in second chances, you know? Sometimes you gotta teach these kids the value of being careful with other people's money. That's so generous of you. The words tasted like poison. I heard you might offer him more hours this summer. Rick's chest puffed up with pride. Thinking about it. Jake's learned his lesson, works hard, doesn't complain. Those are rare qualities in kids these days. Plus, family takes care of family, right? He was doing it again, that condescending tone that made everything sound like charity. Like Jake should be grateful to work for poverty wages because Uncle Rick was such a saint for giving him the opportunity. I'd love to see where Jake works, I said. Could you show me around the kitchen? Rick hesitated for just a moment, then shrugged. Sure, why not? Just you and me here anyway. As he led me toward the kitchen, I slipped my phone out of my purse and hit record. The kitchen was worse than I'd imagined. Rick strutted around like a peacock, pointing out equipment and bragging about his state-of-the-art setup, but all I could see were health code violations everywhere. Grease buildup on the exhaust hood that looked months old. Raw chicken sitting directly next to vegetables on the same prep counter. A thermometer hanging from the walk-in cooler that clearly read 45 degrees, well above the safe zone. This is where Jake spends most of his time, Rick said, gesturing to the dish pit. Good honest work. Builds character. I kept my phone recording, angling it to capture the moldy caulking around the 3-compartment sink and what looked like roach droppings near the floor drain. He really seems to love it here. Yeah, well, I've got a way with kids. Firm but fair, you know? Rick leaned against a prep table, crossing his arms. Speaking of fair, I've been thinking about Jake's wages. My heart stopped. Was he actually going to come clean? The thing is, Sarah, running a business isn't charity. I took a real risk hiring a teenager with no experience. That brisket incident? Could have been a disaster if we'd served spoiled food to customers. The food hadn't spoiled. Jake had told me the whole story. He'd dropped a fresh tray right out of the smoker, and they'd simply cooked a replacement. But I stayed quiet, letting Rick dig his own grave. So I've been paying him a training wage. $7.50 an hour, which is more than generous for someone learning the ropes. But now that he's proven himself. Rick paused dramatically. I'm thinking of bumping him up to $9. Maybe even 10 if he keeps improving. The audacity was breathtaking. He was presenting wage theft as a promotion opportunity, expecting me to be grateful that he might steal slightly less from my son. That's wonderful, I managed. Though I thought you'd agreed on $15 when he started. Rick's expression shifted, just slightly. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face before the fake smile returned. Well, that was more of a goal wage. Something to work toward. You know how kids are, they hear what they want to hear. He was calling Jake a liar to my face. My son, who'd been beating himself up for months, thinking he wasn't good enough to earn his full wage back. I wanted to scream, to grab Rick by his stupid polo shirt and shake him until his teeth rattled. Instead, I smiled wider. Jake's always been such an honest kid. Sometimes too honest, you know? He tells me everything about work. Every detail. Something flickered in Rick's eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even worry. Good. Kids exaggerate, he said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. They don't understand business complexities. Oh, I'm sure you're right. I glanced around the kitchen one more time, making sure my phone caught the employee schedule hanging by the office door. Well, I should let you get back to work. Thanks for the tour. As I headed for the exit, Rick called after me. Sarah? You know family business should stay in the family, right? No point getting outside people involved in things they wouldn't understand. I turned back, tilting my head innocently. Of course. Family takes care of family. But as I walked to my car, Rick's tone echoed in my head. That hadn't been a casual comment, it was a warning. He suspected I was onto him, which meant I needed to move fast. I sat in my car and immediately backed up the recording to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I opened my laptop and started researching the health department's complaint process. Anonymous tips were not only accepted, they were encouraged. Rick wanted to keep this in the family? Perfect. He was about to learn exactly what family loyalty looked like when you messed with the wrong mother's child. I was halfway through filling out the health department complaint form when my phone rang. Jake's number. Mom? His voice was shaky, almost whispered. I think I'm in trouble. My blood turned to ice. What happened? Are you okay? I'm at work. Uncle Rick called me in early because Tommy called out sick. But when I got here, Jake's voice dropped even lower. He knows you came by yesterday. He's been asking weird questions about what I tell you guys at home. Shit. I'd underestimated Rick. Of course he put 2 and 2 together after my little kitchen tour and pointed questions about Jake's wages. What kind of questions, honey? Like whether I complain about work stuff to you and Dad. And if you've ever asked about my paychecks. Jake paused, and I could hear kitchen noise in the background. Mom, he's acting really strange. He keeps staring at me, and he told the other guys they could take their breaks, but I had to keep working. My hands clenched around the phone. Rick was retaliating against my 17-year-old son because he suspected I was onto his scheme. Just do your work and stay calm, I said, trying to keep the fury out of my voice. How many hours are you scheduled today? Until closing. But Mom. Jake's voice got even quieter. I heard him on the phone with someone, talking about unreliable employees and family complications. I think he might fire me. The panic in my son's voice made something snap inside me. Rick had already stolen Jake's wages, humiliated our family, and now he was terrorizing a kid for his mother's actions. This had gone way beyond business, it was personal. Listen to me carefully, I said. I want you to keep your phone on record in your pocket today. Don't make it obvious, but document everything he says to you. Can you do that? I guess, but... And Jake? If he fires you today, I want you to know it has nothing to do with your work. You've been perfect. This is about adult stuff that's not your fault, okay? What adult stuff? Mom, what's going on? Before I could answer, I heard Rick's voice booming in the background. Jake. Put that phone away and get back to work. This isn't social hour. I have to go, Jake whispered, and the line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, my heart hammering. Rick was escalating this, which meant I needed to escalate too. But if I moved too fast, he'd definitely fire Jake out of spite. If I moved too slow, he might fire Jake anyway and cover his tracks. I was still weighing my options when my sister-in-law Diana called. Sarah. Perfect timing. Rick just told me the funniest thing about your visit yesterday. Diana's laugh was bright and clueless. He said you were asking all sorts of questions about the restaurant business. Are you thinking of opening your own place? My stomach dropped. Rick was already spinning the narrative, making my visit sound like casual curiosity instead of investigation. Oh, you know me. Always interested in how successful businesses work, I managed. Well, Rick was so flattered by your interest. He's thinking of offering you a part-time position too. Family business, you know? Maybe you could work with Jake this summer. The manipulation was breathtaking. Rick wasn't just covering his tracks, he was trying to bring me into the fold, probably planning to underpay me too while making it look like family generosity. That's really something, I said. Right? Oh, and Sarah? Diana's tone shifted slightly. Rick mentioned that Jake seemed a little confused about his wages yesterday. Something about thinking he was supposed to make more money? Rick's worried the poor kid might be having some kind of learning difficulties with math. There it was. Rick wasn't just rewriting history, he was setting up Jake to look incompetent or delusional. If Jake complained about his wages now, Rick could point to concerns about my son's mental capacity. I was so angry I could barely speak. Jake's always been great with math. Of course. But you know how teenagers can be. Maybe the stress of work is overwhelming him? Rick thinks it might be better if Jake took on fewer responsibilities until he adjusts. Fewer responsibilities meant fewer hours, which meant less money and less credibility if Jake tried to speak up later. Rick was systematically dismantling my son's position while making himself look like a concerned employer. I should probably talk to Jake about this, I said carefully. Oh, don't worry. Rick's handling it. He's so good with young people. Trust me, Jake's in great hands. After Diana hung up, I realized Rick had just declared war. And he'd made one crucial mistake, he'd underestimated exactly how far a mother would go to protect her child. I didn't wait for Jake to get home. By 4 o'clock, I was sitting in my car across from Smoky Rick's, watching the dinner rush begin through the restaurant's windows. My phone buzzed constantly, 3 missed calls from Tom, 2 texts from Diana about weekend plans, and 1 message from my mom asking about Jake's job. Everyone thought this was just normal family drama. They had no idea Rick was waging psychological warfare against my kid. At 5:30, I saw Jake through the window, moving frantically between the dish pit and prep area while 2 other employees stood around chatting. Even from the parking lot, I could see the stress in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing toward wherever Rick was standing. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Peterson? This is Detective Martinez with the County Health Department. We received your complaint about Smoky Rick's barbecue and wanted to follow up on some details. My heart jumped. That was fast. Food safety complaints get priority, especially when there are photos involved. Those images you submitted show some serious violations. We're planning an inspection tomorrow, but I wanted to ask about the employee you mentioned, your son? Shit. I'd been so angry when I filled out the complaint that I'd mentioned Jake witnessing unsafe practices. Now I was potentially dragging him into an official investigation. What about him? We might need him to verify some of what you reported. Kitchen staff witness a lot that management tries to hide. Is he willing to speak with us? Through the restaurant window, I watched Rick emerge from the back office, his face dark as he surveyed the dining room. His eyes landed on Jake, and even from across the parking lot, I could see him barking orders. Can I get back to you on that? I asked. Of course. But Mrs. Peterson? If there's any retaliation against your son for this complaint, that's a separate violation. Document everything. After the detective hung up, I realized my hands were shaking. This was really happening. In less than 24 hours, health inspectors would descend on Rick's precious restaurant. But that also meant I had less than 24 hours before Rick figured out who'd reported him. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake, asterisk, can you pick me up tonight? Uncle Rick said he'll drive me home, but something feels off, asterisk. Every maternal instinct I had started screaming. Rick driving Jake home meant 30 minutes alone with my son, 30 minutes to intimidate him or pump him for information about what our family knew. I was typing back when I saw movement through the restaurant window. Rick was walking toward Jake with two other men I didn't recognize, older guys in casual clothes who definitely weren't customers. One was taking notes while the other pointed at various kitchen equipment. My blood went cold. Those weren't customers or employees. They looked like inspectors or contractors, which meant Rick was already preparing for something. Had someone tipped him off about the health department complaint? I called Jake immediately. I can't talk, he whispered. There are these guys here asking questions about the kitchen, and Uncle Rick keeps telling them everything is perfect. But Mom, they're looking at all the stuff that's been broken for weeks. What kind of stuff? The cooler temperature thing, the exhaust fan that doesn't work right, the sanitizer dispenser that's been empty since last month. Jake's voice was barely audible. And Uncle Rick pulled me aside and asked if I've ever seen any health department people around here before. Like, ever. My stomach dropped. Rick suspected the complaint came from our family, and now he had Jake trapped there while his friends, or maybe hired help, did damage control. Jake, listen carefully. I want you to tell Uncle Rick you're feeling sick and need to leave early. He already said I have to stay until closing because we're short-staffed. Then make yourself actually sick if you have to. Go throw up in the bathroom. Do whatever it takes to get out of there. Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on? Before I could answer, I saw Rick through the window, walking straight toward the spot where Jake must have been standing. The conversation was about to end whether we wanted it to or not. I'll be in the parking lot in 5 minutes, I said quickly. If anything weird happens, just walk outside. I'll handle Uncle Rick. But as I hung up and started my car, I caught sight of Rick's F-150. And there, tucked under his windshield wiper, was what looked like an official notice. Someone had beaten me to it. The question was whether they were trying to help Jake, or if Rick had more enemies than I'd realized. Either way, this was about to get a lot more complicated. I pulled into the parking lot just as Jake burst through the restaurant's front door, his face pale and his hands shaking. He practically threw himself into my passenger seat, slamming the door behind him. Drive, he said, his voice tight. Just drive. I pulled out of the parking lot, checking my rearview mirror. Rick stood in the doorway, his face thunderous as he watched us leave. What happened in there? Jake ran his hands through his hair, leaving it sticking up at odd angles. Those guys weren't health inspectors, Mom. They were Rick's buddies from his poker group. I recognized one of them from when Dad and I went to that barbecue competition last year. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What were they doing? Fixing things. Fast. Jake's voice cracked slightly. The broken thermometer got replaced in like 10 minutes. Someone brought an industrial cleaner and went crazy on the exhaust hood. And Rick made me throw away all the old cutting boards and unpack new ones from boxes he had hidden in his office. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. Rick wasn't just covering his tracks, he'd been prepared for this. Which meant either he had advance warning about the health inspection, or he was paranoid enough to have an emergency cleanup crew on standby. Did he say anything about why they were there? Jake nodded miserably. He told everyone it was a routine maintenance day and that we needed to make sure everything was up to his high standards. But then he pulled me aside and asked point blank if anyone in our family had ever complained about the restaurant to anyone official. My stomach dropped. What did you tell him? The truth, that I didn't know what he was talking about. But Mom, he didn't believe me. He kept asking if you seemed upset about anything work-related, if Dad had made any comments about the restaurant, even if Grandma had said anything weird at Sunday dinner last week. This was spiraling out of control faster than I'd anticipated. Rick was in full damage control mode, which meant he definitely suspected our family was behind whatever threat he was preparing for. Then things got really weird, Jake continued. While his friends were cleaning, Rick sat me down and offered me a promotion. Assistant manager, $15 an hour, my own key to the place. I slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the side of the road. He what? 15 an hour, Mom. The exact amount I thought I was making before. And when he said it, he was watching my face really carefully, like he was waiting for some specific reaction. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Rick was testing Jake, trying to figure out if my son knew about the wage theft. If Jake had acted surprised or confused about the $15 offer, it would have confirmed that he'd been aware he was being underpaid all along. What did you say? I thanked him and said it sounded great. I didn't know what else to do. Jake turned to me, his eyes wide and scared. But Mom, that's when everything went really wrong. Rick smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Then he said something about how family loyalty goes both ways, and how he'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings that might hurt my future job prospects. The threat was barely veiled. Rick was essentially telling my 17-year-old son that if our family caused trouble, he'd make sure Jake couldn't find work anywhere else in town. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, asterisk health inspection postponed 24 hours due to scheduling conflict. New date tomorrow at 2 p.m. asterisk. I stared at the message, my blood turning to ice. There was no way this was a coincidence. Somehow, Rick had managed to buy himself an extra day to prepare. Mom? You're making that face again. The really scary one. I looked at my son, my smart, hard-working, trusting boy who'd been manipulated and threatened by a man he should have been able to trust. Rick thought he was so clever, playing these games with our family. He had no idea he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Jake, I need you to call in sick tomorrow. And maybe the next day too. But I can't. Rick said if I miss any shifts this week, he'll have to reconsider my reliability for the assistant manager position. Trust me, honey. You won't be working there much longer anyway. It was time to stop playing defense. If Rick wanted to escalate this into psychological warfare against my kid, then I was about to show him what real warfare looked like. I spent that entire night planning Rick's destruction. While Jake slept fitfully down the hall, I'd heard him tossing and turning until almost 2 a.m. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, 3 notebooks, and a growing sense of cold determination. Rick wanted to play psychological games with my son? Fine. But he'd picked the wrong opponent. First, I created a timeline of every violation I'd witnessed, photographed, or recorded. The wage theft was just the tip of the iceberg. Health code violations, potential tax evasion if he was paying Jake under the table, workplace intimidation of a minor. Rick had been building a house of cards for years, and I was about to bring it all crashing down. My phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Tom's sister Diana, calling before most people were even awake. Sarah, I'm so sorry to bother you early, but Rick asked me to call. Her voice sounded strained, not like her usual cheery self. He's really concerned about Jake. I kept my voice neutral. Concerned how? Well, after Jake left early yesterday, Rick found some inconsistencies in the register. Money missing from the cash drawer. Diana paused, and I could hear her discomfort even through the phone. Rick feels terrible even bringing this up, but the timing. White-hot rage flooded through me so fast I nearly dropped the phone. Rick was setting Jake up, creating a theft allegation to justify firing him and destroy his credibility. If my son was branded as a thief, no one would believe anything he said about wage theft or unsafe working conditions. How much money? I asked, proud of how steady my voice sounded. About $60. Rick thinks maybe Jake got confused about making change, or maybe panicked when those maintenance guys showed up and made some accounting errors. Diana's voice got smaller. He wants to give Jake a chance to explain before involving outside authorities. The threat was crystal clear. Confess to theft, or Rick would file criminal charges against my 17-year-old son. That's very generous of Rick, I said, each word carefully controlled. When does he want to talk to Jake? This morning, before the restaurant opens. Rick thinks it's better to handle these things privately, family to family. I hung up and immediately called Detective Martinez at the health department. Mrs. Peterson? You're up early. I need to move up that inspection. Today, if possible. What's the emergency? The owner is retaliating against my son. He's fabricating theft allegations to cover up the wage violations and intimidate Jake into silence. My voice was shaking with fury. Detective, if Rick gets Jake alone this morning, he's going to coerce a confession out of a scared teenager for a crime that never happened. There was a long pause. Mrs. Peterson, that's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence of this retaliation? My sister-in-law just called me at 6:47 a.m. with Rick's concerns about missing money that coincidentally disappeared right after my son started asking questions about his paychecks. I see. Another pause. Unfortunately, I can't move the inspection up without probable cause beyond family disputes. But I can give you some advice. If your son is being accused of theft, he has the right to have a parent present during any questioning. He also has the right to remain silent. After hanging up, I realized Rick had backed me into a corner. If Jake didn't show up to explain the missing money, Rick would probably file charges immediately. If he did show up, Rick would manipulate him into admitting fault for something that never happened. But Rick had made one crucial error. He'd assumed I'd react defensively, that I'd focus on protecting Jake from the theft allegation. Instead, I was going to use it against him. I woke Jake at 8 a.m. and explained everything. Watching my son's face crumble as he realized his uncle was trying to frame him for theft was one of the hardest things I'd ever endured. But Mom, I didn't take anything. I've never even touched the register except when Rick specifically told me to grab something from underneath it. I know, baby. And we're going to prove it. How? It's my word against his, and he's the adult with the business. I smiled, and Jake actually flinched a little. Because Rick just made his biggest mistake. He's so focused on discrediting you that he's forgotten I have evidence of everything else he's been doing wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Rick himself. Asterisk Jake needs to come in at 10 a.m. to clear up some confusion about yesterday. Family matter. Bring his work shirt, we might need to make some changes to his schedule. Asterisk. The work shirt request confirmed my suspicions. Rick was planning to fire Jake today, probably after forcing some kind of confession. He wanted the shirt back so Jake couldn't claim to still work there when the health inspector showed up. I texted back, asterisk Jake will be there at 10. I'll drive him, asterisk. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Then reappeared. Rick was trying to figure out how to exclude me without seeming suspicious. Finally, asterisk might be better if Jake handles this himself. Man-to-man conversation. Help him grow up, asterisk. I'll wait in the car, I replied. Just want to make sure he gets there safely. What Rick didn't know was that I wouldn't be waiting in the car at all. I'd be inside the restaurant with a hidden camera, recording every word of his attempt to railroad my son. And after that performance, when Rick thought he'd won, I'd hand over every piece of evidence I'd gathered to the health department, labor board, and anyone else who'd listen. Rick wanted to destroy my family's reputation? Perfect. I was about to turn his own tactics against him and watch his entire world burn. At 9:45 a.m., I dropped Jake off at the front entrance of Smoky Rick's while I parked around back near the employee entrance. My hands were shaking as I checked the tiny recording device I'd bought at the electronics store that morning, a pen camera that could capture both audio and video for up to 2 hours. The back door was propped open with a milk crate, probably for ventilation since Rick was too cheap to fix the exhaust system properly. I could hear voices from inside as I crept closer. Jake, son, come sit down. We need to have a serious talk. Rick's voice carried that fake paternal tone that made my skin crawl. I positioned myself just outside the doorway where I could see into the office through the open door. Rick sat behind his desk like a judge, while Jake perched nervously on a folding chair that had seen better days. Now, I want you to know this conversation is just between us men, Rick continued. Sometimes these things happen, especially with young people who aren't used to handling money. Jake's voice was small, confused. Uncle Rick, I really don't know what you're talking about. The $60, Jake. From yesterday's register. Rick leaned forward, his tone becoming more aggressive. Look, I've got security cameras, I've got witnesses, and I've got a cash drawer that came up short exactly when you were working the counter. My blood boiled. Rick was lying through his teeth. I'd been in that restaurant yesterday and hadn't seen a single security camera anywhere except maybe a fake dome by the entrance. But I never worked the register yesterday, Jake protested. I was in dish pit the whole time, remember? You said Tommy was the only one allowed to handle money because he's been here longer. Rick's jaw tightened at being caught in his lie. Well, maybe you got confused about which day. The point is, money is missing, and you're the newest employee. These things happen, but we need to address it. Uncle Rick, I swear I didn't take any money. Can we call my mom? She said she'd wait in the car. Your mother doesn't need to be involved in this, Jake. This is between you and me. Rick's voice hardened. But since you're being difficult about this, let me explain how this is going to work. Rick opened his desk drawer and pulled out what looked like a pre-written document. This is a resignation letter. You're going to sign it, acknowledging that you're leaving due to personal conduct issues, and in exchange, I won't file charges with the police. Jake's voice cracked. But I didn't do anything wrong. Sign the letter, Jake. Your mother's already been asking questions around town about my business practices. Do you really think I don't know your family is trying to cause problems for me? Rick slid the paper across the desk. This is your chance to end this quietly. Otherwise, things get very complicated very fast. The threat was clear, and I watched my 17-year-old son's shoulders collapse under the weight of adult manipulation he wasn't equipped to handle. But before Jake could respond, we all heard the front door chime, followed by official-sounding voices. Health Department. We're here for a scheduled inspection. Rick's face went white, then red, then purple. He looked at Jake with naked suspicion. Did you know they were coming today? I don't even know what that means, Jake said, genuine confusion in his voice. The voices from the dining room grew closer. Sir? We need to speak with the owner immediately. Rick stood up, smoothing his shirt, trying to regain composure. Stay here, he hissed at Jake. Don't move, don't speak to anyone. We'll finish this conversation when I'm done with him. As Rick hurried toward the front, I quickly slipped through the back door and into the office where Jake sat frozen in terror. Mom? What are you doing here? Uncle Rick said. Forget what Uncle Rick said. I grabbed the resignation letter from the desk, scanning its contents. It was worse than I'd thought. Rick had written it to make Jake sound not just incompetent, but potentially criminal. We're leaving. Right now. But the money. There is no missing money, Jake. He's lying. From the dining room, I could hear Rick's voice getting louder and more defensive as the health inspectors began their work. Then I heard something that made my blood freeze. Actually, we've received multiple complaints about this establishment in the past 24 hours, one of the inspectors was saying. Anonymous tips, social media reports, and one very detailed complaint from someone with inside knowledge of your kitchen practices. Multiple complaints? I'd only filed one report. Which meant other people had been documenting Rick's violations too. Jake and I looked at each other as we heard Rick's voice rising to nearly a shout. This is harassment. Someone is orchestrating a campaign against my business. He was right. But what he didn't know was that the campaign was just getting started. As Jake and I crept toward the back exit, I heard footsteps rushing toward the office. Rick's voice carried from the dining room, sharp with panic. I need to check something in my office real quick. We were trapped. The back door was 15 feet away, but Rick would spot us the moment he rounded the corner. I grabbed Jake's arm and pulled him into the walk-in cooler, easing the heavy door almost closed but leaving it slightly ajar so we wouldn't suffocate. The cooler was freezing and cramped, filled with boxes of meat and wilted vegetables that should have been thrown out days ago. Jake pressed against me, shivering, as we heard Rick burst into the office. Where the hell? His voice cut off abruptly. Then, louder, Jake. Where did you go? Through the crack in the cooler door, I watched Rick frantically search the office, grabbing papers from his desk and shoving them into a garbage bag. The resignation letter disappeared, along with what looked like employee timesheets and a ledger book I hadn't noticed before. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text message, but I couldn't check it without making noise. Rick's voice echoed through the kitchen. Jake. Your mom's car is still in the parking lot. I know you're here somewhere. One of the health inspectors appeared in the doorway. Sir, we need you back in the dining room. We have some serious violations to discuss. Give me 2 minutes. I'm looking for my employee. Sir, you need to come now. We found several critical health code violations that require immediate attention. Rick cursed under his breath, then stomped back toward the front. But instead of relief, I felt a growing dread. Being trapped in his cooler meant I was seeing things I wasn't supposed to see. Like the thermometer reading 38 degrees, well below the legal minimum for food storage. Like the boxes of chicken with expiration dates from 2 weeks ago. Like the industrial-sized container of bleach sitting directly next to uncovered containers of barbecue sauce. Jake noticed it too. Mom, this stuff is all wrong, isn't it? I nodded, pulling out my phone to take photos. But when I opened my messages, my blood ran cold. 3 texts from unknown numbers. Asterisk Rick's been paying off health inspectors for 2 years. Today's inspection is the real deal asterisk. Asterisk your son isn't the first teenager Rick stolen wages from. Check the labor board complaints asterisk. Asterisk be careful. Rick's desperate and getting dangerous asterisk. Someone else was watching this situation unfold. Someone with inside knowledge of Rick's operation. But who? And why were they helping us? From the dining room, Rick's voice grew increasingly agitated. Those violations are minor. Easily fixed. There's no need for any formal reports. Sir, we found evidence of temperature abuse, cross-contamination, and improper chemical storage. This establishment needs to close immediately pending a full investigation. The words hit me like a physical blow. They were shutting down the restaurant. Right now. Which meant Rick was about to lose everything, his business, his reputation, his income. Which also meant he was about to become exponentially more dangerous. Jake grabbed my arm. Mom, we need to get out of here. If Uncle Rick loses the restaurant, he's going to blame our family for everything. But as we prepared to slip out the back door, I heard something that made my stomach drop. Rick's voice, closer now, talking on his phone. I don't care what it costs. I need you to find out everything about Sarah Peterson. Where she works, where she banks, what kind of car she drives. Everything. He wasn't just planning to blame us. He was planning revenge. And we were still trapped in his restaurant with no way out. I heard Rick's footsteps getting closer to the kitchen, his voice still on the phone. Yeah, I know what kind of pressure to apply. Sometimes people need to understand there are consequences for their actions. Jake's eyes went wide with terror. My 17-year-old son was hearing his uncle plan some kind of retaliation against our family, and I could see him starting to panic. His breathing got shallow and quick, the beginning of the anxiety attacks he'd had as a kid. Deep breaths, I whispered, rubbing his back. We're going to be okay. But honestly, I wasn't sure we were. Rick's voice was getting closer, and he sounded unhinged. The health inspectors were still in the dining room, but if Rick came back to the kitchen and found us hiding in his cooler, there was no telling what he'd do. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, asterisk service entrance is clear. Blue Honda in the alley. Get out now, asterisk. Someone was watching the building. Someone who knew we were trapped and was trying to help us escape. But who? And how did they know we were here? I grabbed Jake's hand and we slipped out of the cooler. The kitchen was empty, but I could hear Rick's voice echoing from the office area, still on his phone call. We had maybe 30 seconds before he came back. We made it to the back door when I heard the worst possible sound, Rick's voice, much closer than expected. I don't give a damn what the inspectors found. Someone set me up, and I know exactly who. Footsteps. Coming fast toward the kitchen. Jake and I burst through the back door and ran toward the alley, where sure enough, a blue Honda sat idling with the driver's door open. But as we got closer, I realized I recognized the person behind the wheel. Tommy Martinez, the college kid who'd called out sick yesterday, the one whose absence had forced Rick to call Jake in early. He was maybe 20, with nervous eyes and hands that shook as he gestured for us to get in the car. Hurry, he whispered. Rick's losing it in there. The health department found the fake temperature logs he's been keeping. Fake temperature logs. My stomach turned as more pieces of Rick's operation fell into place. He hadn't just been cutting corners, he'd been systematically falsifying safety records. Jake climbed into the back seat while I got in front. Tommy, why are you helping us? Because Rick's been screwing over everyone who works for him, not just Jake. Tommy pulled out of the alley, his hand still trembling on the steering wheel. I've been documenting everything for months, waiting for the right moment to report him. You're the one who filed the other complaints? Some of them. But you started something when you filed that health department report. Other people started coming forward, former employees, suppliers he stiffed, even some customers who got food poisoning but were too scared to say anything because Rick threatened them. My head was spinning. Rick threatened customers? Last month, this family got sick from undercooked chicken. When they complained, Rick told them he'd sue them for defamation if they left bad reviews or contacted any authorities. Said he had lawyers who specialized in destroying people's credit and reputations. Jake leaned forward from the back seat. Tommy, is that why you've been acting weird at work? I thought you didn't like me. Tommy glanced in the rearview mirror. Dude, I was trying to protect you. Rick's been talking for weeks about how your family thinks they're better than everyone else, how he was going to teach you people some respect. When I heard him on the phone this morning arranging to frame you for theft, I knew I had to do something. Frame me for theft. So Tommy had heard the whole setup. Did you record any of that? Better than that. Tommy pulled his phone out of his pocket. I've been recording everything Rick says for 3 months. Every threat, every illegal order, every time he brags about cheating employees or customers. The relief was so overwhelming I almost cried. We had evidence. Real, undeniable evidence that would destroy any credibility Rick had left. But then Tommy's phone rang, and Rick's name appeared on the screen. He's calling me, Tommy said, his voice shaking. If I don't answer, he'll know I'm involved. But if I do answer it, I said. But put it on speaker. Let's hear exactly how desperate he's getting. Tommy hit the speaker button, and Rick's voice filled the car, tight with barely controlled rage. Tommy, where the hell are you? I need you here right now. We have a situation. Tommy, where the hell are you? I need you here right now. We have a situation. Tommy's voice cracked as he tried to sound normal. I'm at home, Rick. You said I was off today because I called in sick yesterday, remember? Forget about being sick. Get down here immediately. The health department is crawling all over my restaurant, and Jake Peterson has disappeared along with his psycho mother. I flinched at the venom in Rick's voice. Beside me, Tommy was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles had gone white. Disappeared? Tommy managed. What do you mean? I mean they were here 20 minutes ago, and now they're gone. But Sarah's car is still in the parking lot, which means they're hiding somewhere nearby, probably recording everything like the sneaky little rats they are. My blood went cold. If Rick knew we might be recording, that meant he was being more careful about what he said. But apparently not careful enough, because his next words made my heart stop. Tommy, I need you to go by the Peterson house. Check if they went home. And if you see that bitch Sarah, you tell her that she has no idea what kind of war she just started. Jake grabbed my shoulder from the back seat, his face pale with terror. Rick was sending someone to our house. Our home, where my husband Tom would be getting ready for work, completely unaware that his brother-in-law had declared war on our family. Rick, I don't think I should, Tommy started. You should do whatever the hell I tell you if you want to keep your job. Rick's voice exploded through the phone speaker. These people are trying to destroy me, Tommy. Destroy everything I built. And anyone who doesn't help me fight back is going to be considered an enemy. The threat was unmistakable. Rick wasn't just coming after my family anymore, he was recruiting his employees into his campaign of revenge. Okay, Tommy said quickly. I'll drive by their house. And Tommy? If you see anything suspicious, you call me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself. Sarah Peterson thinks she's smart, but she has no idea how many people in this town owe me favors. That sent a chill down my spine. Rick was talking about calling in favors, which meant he had a network of people who might help him retaliate against us. In a small town, that could mean anyone: cops, city officials, other business owners. What kind of suspicious things should I look for? Tommy asked, and I could tell he was trying to get Rick to say more incriminating things on the recording. Cars that don't belong there. People watching the house. Any sign that they're planning to cause more trouble. Rick's breathing was heavy, like he was pacing. And Tommy? Make sure you write down their license plates, take pictures of anyone you see coming or going. I want documentation of everything. Now Rick was asking his employee to surveil my family. This had escalated beyond wage theft and health code violations. This was harassment, possibly stalking. Rick, Tommy said carefully, are you sure this is legal? I mean, watching someone's house. Legal? Rick's laugh was sharp and bitter. Tommy, they destroyed my business in one day. The health department just shut me down indefinitely. I've got $15,000 worth of food that's going to spoil, 3 employees who won't have jobs, and a reputation that's been trashed by lies and sabotage. You think I give a damn about legal? The mask was completely off now. Rick was admitting that he planned to break the law to get revenge on my family. But then his voice dropped to something even more sinister. Besides, sometimes people need to learn that actions have consequences. Sarah Peterson thinks she can hide behind anonymous complaints and government agencies. She's about to discover how wrong she is. Tommy met my eyes, and I could see the fear there. Rick wasn't just threatening retaliation, he was threatening direct confrontation. And we were driving around in Tommy's car while my husband was home alone, completely unaware that danger might be heading his way. Tommy, hang up the phone, I said urgently. We need to get to my house before whoever Rick sends gets there first. But before Tommy could end the call, Rick's voice cut through the speaker again, and this time he wasn't talking to Tommy anymore. Diana? Yeah, it's Rick. I need you to call your brother Tom right now. No, don't argue with me. Just call him and find out if Sarah and Jake made it home yet. My sister-in-law. Rick was pulling Diana into this, using her to get information about our movements. She had no idea she was being manipulated into helping Rick track my family. Tommy finally hung up and immediately pulled a U-turn, tires squealing as he headed toward our neighborhood. Sarah, this is really bad. Rick's completely lost it. I've never heard him like this. How long have you been recording him? I asked, my mind racing through possibilities. Since my second week working there. He threatened to fire me for asking about overtime pay, but something about the way he said it made me realize I needed to protect myself. Tommy's hands were shaking harder now. I never thought it would escalate to this. I thought the worst thing he could do was fire people. Jake leaned forward between our seats. Mom, what if Dad's not home? What if whoever Rick sends gets there first and just waits for us? The thought made my stomach lurch. Our house suddenly felt like a trap instead of a sanctuary. But we couldn't just disappear. Tom would be worried sick, and running would only make Rick think his intimidation tactics were working. My phone rang. Tom's number. Sarah, where are you? Diana just called asking weird questions about whether you and Jake were home safe. She sounded really strange, like someone was telling her what to say. Relief flooded through me at the sound of my husband's voice, but it was quickly replaced by fear. Tom, listen carefully. Don't go outside, don't answer the door for anyone, and don't tell Diana or anyone else where we are. What the hell is going on? Diana said there was some kind of emergency at Rick's restaurant. Rick's restaurant got shut down by the health department, and he's blaming our family. He's sending people to watch our house, Tom. This has gotten really dangerous really fast. There was a long silence. When Tom spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. He's threatening my family? Tom, don't do anything stupid. Don't go looking for him, don't call him, don't. That son of a bitch has been stealing from Jake for months, and now he's threatening us? Tom's voice was rising. I'm driving over there right now. No. I shouted, making Tommy swerve slightly. Tom, that's exactly what he wants. He's trying to provoke us into doing something that makes us look like the aggressors. Then what do you suggest we do? Hide in our house while Rick sends his goons to intimidate us? Before I could answer, Tommy's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it and his face went white. It's from Marcus, one of the other guys who works at the restaurant. Rick just offered him $200 to drive by your house and keep an eye on things until this evening. Jake grabbed my arm. Mom, that's like sending a spy to watch our house all day. But something about this felt wrong. Rick was being sloppy, involving too many people, making too many witnesses to his harassment campaign. Either he was more desperate than I thought, or... Tommy, who else has Rick called in the past hour? I don't know, but Marcus said Rick was making a bunch of calls, trying to get people to help him with security concerns. He's telling everyone that your family is part of some conspiracy to destroy local businesses. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Peterson? This is Detective Rodriguez with the County Sheriff's Department. We've received several reports of a business owner making threats against a local family. Would you be available to come in and make a statement? Tommy and Jake both stared at me as I tried to process this development. Someone had called the police about Rick's threats. But who? And what exactly had they reported? Detective, are we in immediate danger? That's what we're trying to determine, ma'am. How soon can you get here? As I agreed to meet the detective within the hour, I realized that Rick's campaign of intimidation had just backfired spectacularly. By involving multiple people in his revenge scheme, he created multiple witnesses to his threats. But I also realized that cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. And Rick was definitely cornered now. The sheriff's station felt surreal, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead while Detective Rodriguez walked us through the timeline of complaints they'd received about Rick in the past 4 hours alone. 3 different employees called in threats made against the Peterson family. 2 customers reported being intimidated when they tried to complain about food safety. And we have this. He slid a printed screenshot across the table. Posted to the restaurant's Facebook page 20 minutes ago. My blood turned to ice as I read Rick's public meltdown in real time. Asterisk Smoky Rick's IS closed due to false allegations from jealous competitors and disgruntled family members. Certain people will be held accountable for the damage they've caused to innocent hardworking business owners. Asterisk. Jake read over my shoulder and whispered, Mom, everyone's going to know he's talking about us. Detective Rodriguez nodded grimly. That post has 37 comments already, and several people have tagged your family's social media accounts. Mr. Peterson is essentially directing harassment toward you publicly. Tommy shifted nervously in his chair. Detective, there's more. Rick's been calling people all day, trying to get them to help him gather information about Sarah's family. He offered my coworker money to watch their house. We have units doing drive-bys of your neighborhood every hour, Rodriguez assured me. But Mrs. Peterson, I need to ask, did you file the health department complaint that started this? I met his eyes steadily. Yes. After I discovered my brother-in-law was stealing wages from my minor son and running an unsafe restaurant. And you documented these violations? Extensively. Rodriguez leaned back, studying me. Mr. Peterson claims you've been conducting a malicious campaign to destroy his business through false reports and fake online reviews. My heart skipped. Fake reviews? 17 negative reviews posted to various sites in the past 12 hours. All from brand new accounts. All describing health violations in very specific detail. Rodriguez pulled out another printout. Reviews mentioning grease buildup on exhaust hoods, improper food storage temperatures, cross-contamination, details that match exactly what the health inspectors found today. Tommy and Jake both turned to stare at me. I felt heat creeping up my neck as I realized how this looked. I'd planned to write fake reviews, had even created the accounts, but I'd never actually posted anything. Detective, I didn't write those reviews. I can prove it, check the IP addresses, the timestamps. When those reviews were being posted, I was either trapped in Rick's restaurant or driving around with Tommy. Then who did? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Tom's number again, but when I answered, it wasn't my husband's voice. Sarah? It's Diana. I'm at your house with Tom. Her voice sounded shaky, scared. We need to talk. There are things about Rick that you don't know, things I should have told you a long time ago. My sister-in-law, who'd been making excuses for Rick all day, was suddenly at my house wanting to confess something. The timing felt too convenient, too orchestrated. Diana, is everything okay? You sound strange. I'm the one who's been posting the reviews, she blurted out. And I'm the one who called the police about Rick's threats. Sarah, I've been documenting his behavior for 2 years, waiting for someone brave enough to finally stand up to him. The room went silent. Detective Rodriguez raised his eyebrows as this new information completely shifted the narrative he'd been building. But if Diana had been working against Rick this whole time, why had she been defending him to me? And why was she calling for my house instead of her own? Something about this revelation felt like another trap, and I was starting to realize that Rick might not be the only family member playing a dangerous game. The truth came out in my living room an hour later, with Detective Rodriguez taking notes while Diana sat on my couch, tears streaming down her face. Rick's been abusing me for 3 years, she whispered, Tom's protective arm around her shoulders. Not physically, but financially, emotionally. He controls every penny I make, monitors my phone calls, threatens to destroy my credit if I ever leave him. My heart broke for her, but I was still confused. Diana, why didn't you tell us? Because he said if I ever involved family, he'd make sure Tom lost his construction contracts. Rick knows people all over the county, inspectors, permit officers, union reps, he wasn't bluffing. Diana wiped her nose with a tissue Tom handed her. But when I heard him planning to frame Jake for theft this morning, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Detective Rodriguez looked up from his notes. Mrs. Peterson, Diana Peterson, you recorded the conversation about framing Jake? Diana nodded and pulled out her phone. I'd been secretly recording Rick for months, hoping to gather enough evidence to divorce him safely. When he started making calls about teaching the Peterson family a lesson, I knew he'd finally gone too far. As Diana played the recordings, Rick's voice filled our living room with crystal clarity, admitting to wage theft, planning to frame Jake, arranging surveillance of our house, even bragging about bribing health inspectors in the past. Every illegal scheme, every threat, every manipulation was documented. There's more, Diana continued. The fake online reviews? I wrote them using information from health violations I've witnessed over the years. Rick's been cutting corners since day one, but he always managed to cover it up during inspections. Tommy shook his head in amazement. So you've been working to expose him this whole time? I just needed someone else to make a first move so I wouldn't be his only target. Diana looked at me with something like admiration. When you filed that health department complaint, Sarah, you gave me the opening I needed to finally fight back. Detective Rodriguez closed his notebook. Ladies, what you provided here is enough to charge Mr. Peterson with wage theft, conspiracy, harassment, and about 6 different violations of labor law. He's looking at serious jail time. 2 hours later, we watched from my living room window as police cars surrounded Rick's house across town. According to the scanner app Jake had downloaded, Rick was arrested without incident, though neighbors reported hearing him screaming about family betrayal as they put him in the patrol car. The local newspaper ran the story the next day, local restaurant owner arrested for wage theft and intimidation campaign. By the end of the week, 3 other former employees had come forward with their own stories of Rick's illegal business practices. Jake got a job at the hardware store downtown, making an honest $15 an hour with a boss who actually appreciated his work ethic. Diana filed for divorce and moved into our guest room temporarily while she got back on her feet. As for Smokey Rick's BBQ, the building sat empty for 2 months before being bought by a young couple who turned it into a family diner. They hired several of Rick's former employees and actually follow health codes. Sometimes I drive past the old restaurant and remember that night when I saw my son counting crumpled bills at our kitchen table. Rick thought he could take advantage of Jake's trust and inexperience. He thought our family would stay quiet and accept his abuse. He was wrong. The best revenge, I learned, isn't always something you plan. Sometimes it's simply refusing to stay silent when someone powerful tries to hurt the people you love. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you discover you weren't fighting alone after all.